A coalition historian mapping every empire in galactic history discovered the same human name buried in the records of 37 civilizations. Same face, same description. In a species that lives 80 years, this advisor surfaced across 40,000 years of history, always beside the throne, always just out of the light. She stopped mapping. She started asking, who is he and is he still out there? Archivist Kalen Voss spent decades cataloging fallen empires. Then she found the name, Marcus Kane, human, appearing across 40,000 years, always an advisor, never the ruler. The coalition says humans live 80 years, so either this is a cosmic coincidence or someone has been watching from the shadows for millennia, and he's still out there. The first mention was in the Logra Empire, a footnote in a tax record from 41,000 years ago. Kalen Voss almost missed it. A minor entry, Marcus Kane, advisory consultation, remuneration 12 gold weights. She logged it without a second thought. Just another name among billions, swallowed by time. But the Logra were an insectoid species that had never encountered humans. Earth wouldn't develop agriculture for another 30,000 years. And yet there he was, a human name, buried in a ledger that predated civilization on his own planet. A year later, while cross-referencing the collapse of the Itrian hegemony, she found the name again. Same spelling, same role. An advisor to the crown, described in court records as the quiet one, of pale skin and brown pelt. The Itrian Empire fell almost 4,000 years after the Logra on the other side of the galaxy. The odds of the same name appearing once was a curiosity. Twice was impossible. Kaylin ran a full archival sweep, her claws trembling over the hollow display. The algorithm returned 37 matches, 37 separate empires, 37 different centuries. One man. She pulled the visual records. In the ruins of the Draken Imperium, a faded mural showed a coronation scene, the hulking reptilian queen on her throne, and beside her, a slight human figure with brown hair and a calm, knowing half-smile. Marcus Kane. The same face, unchanged, staring out across a span of 20,000 years. The archives held a security still from the Ixian oligarchy, taken just 200 years ago, a group of robed officials, and there, half-turned from the camera, the same brown-haired human in timeless dark clothing. He hadn't aged a day. Kalen dug deeper. The records weren't just academic. They were sanitized. Every file she accessed triggered silent alarms she didn't know existed. Passages had been redacted by an authority she couldn't identify. Someone had been scrubbing Marcus Kane from history, but not perfectly. The more she searched, the more the archives seemed to push back. Then one evening, alone in her data crypt, a message blinked onto her private terminal. No origin, no trace, just 5 words. You should stop now, archivist. She should have been terrified. Instead, she was furious. She ran one final query, not for the past, for the present, and the present answered. Marcus Kane was listed as a current advisory attaché to the coalition's Terran delegation. Active, operational, still beside the throne, and now he knew her name. The message lingered on her terminal for exactly 4 seconds before it erased itself. Kalen sat frozen, the words burned into her retinas. You should stop now, archivist. She traced the signal. Nothing. No origin node, no relay path. It was as if the data had materialized from the void inside her own console. She was a senior archival analyst with Coalition Security Tier 4 clearance. There were exactly 3 beings in the galaxy who should have been able to reach that terminal without leaving a trace. None of them had reason to threaten her, unless none of them were responsible, unless the sender was someone who had been navigating galactic bureaucracy since before bureaucracy existed. She sent a formal request to the Terran delegation for an interview with attaché Marcus Kane. Standard protocol. Diplomatic courtesy. Within the hour, her request was escalated directly to the office of the Coalition Archival Oversight Committee. Not denied, escalated. That had never happened. An hour after that, 2 security officers appeared at her archive station, not to arrest her, but to politely and firmly escort her to a meeting she hadn't asked for. They brought her to a windowless room 3 levels beneath the main administrative spire, where a human woman in a gray suit was waiting. She introduced herself as Director Chen of the Terran External Affairs Bureau, a department Kalen had never heard of, which for a historian of galactic governance was alarming. Director Chen smiled without warmth and asked her to drop the inquiry into Marcus Kane. She said the matter was classified beyond coalition security ratings. She said it concerned temporal strategic architecture, a phrase so bureaucratic and hollow that Kalen could almost hear the screams of redacted documents behind it. And then, as if testing the temperature of the room, Director Chen added, "Archivist Voss, there are aspects of galactic history that are not ready to be recorded, and there are historians who are not ready to record them. Please trust that you fall into the second category." Kalen nodded, said she understood, and went back to her apartment. That night, she accessed the Coalition's deep archival stratum using a zero-trace decryption key she had obtained from a colleague who owed her a favor, a Jith archivist whose people had first contacted Earth. If the Coalition wanted to bury Marcus Kane, then the truth was still down there, hiding beneath layers of official amnesia. She found it almost immediately. A sealed subfolder, flagged with a designation she had never seen. Legacy Asset Eternal Recurrence Program. Inside were documents that predated the Coalition itself. Medical scans showing a human male with identical DNA to the one in the Draken mural. A body had been recovered from a wrecked vessel in the Vec Expanse, carbon dated to 27,000 years ago. The DNA was a perfect match. Another file, a psychological assessment from 900 years ago conducted after the fall of the Helix Dominion. The evaluator had written, "Subject maintains consistent personality matrix. Reintegration into standard civilizational flow estimated at 3 to 5 decades. Recommend asset be placed in advisory role for emergent species to ensure guided development." She was reading a personnel file for an immortal, not a myth, a program. The Coalition was using him like a shepherding tool across millennia. But the question that made her carapace tighten was this: who had created the program? And who exactly was being shepherded? Kalen's friend, the Jith archivist, messaged her in the middle of the night, a voice-only transmission crackling with fear. "Kalen, I looked at those files you mentioned. I shouldn't have. They're not just Coalition documents. Some of the layers are older than any known government. There's a string of text I found hidden in the metadata. It translates to Project Endurance, Contact Protocol 0. Kalen, it's from before the dawn of the Coalition, before recorded history. Someone put Marcus Kane in place long before any of us existed, and the Coalition didn't create him. They found him. And they're terrified of what else might be out there. I'm scrubbing my logs. You should do the same. And Kalen, there was a second signature on that ancient protocol. Another name. I couldn't read it, but it wasn't human. Then the line went dead. The archivist's identifier dissolved from the network. By morning, Kalen received an official notification that her colleague had been reassigned to a deep space expedition and would be incommunicado indefinitely. She had never heard of an archivist being reassigned to deep space in the history of her profession. She returned to the hidden file. She followed the trail of the second signature, cross-referencing every cipher she knew. The second name was fragmented, intentionally shattered across 1,000 data shards. She reassembled it piece by piece over 3 sleepless days, and when she finally saw it whole, she stopped breathing. The name was Althea. In ancient galactic standard, it meant the ones who came before. It appeared only once in the entire Coalition archive, in a single entry from a dead civilization's mythology, a race that had watched the galaxy in its infancy, who had built something terrible and then vanished. The myth said they left behind a sentinel to ensure the galaxy never repeated their mistake, A sentinel wearing the face of whatever species was clever enough to rise up. A sentinel tasked with pruning the tree of civilization before its branches reached too high. Kalen understood then. Marcus Kane wasn't just an immortal advisor. He was a gardener. And the empires he had counseled, the ones that had risen and fallen with him at the side of their thrones, every single one of them had been deliberately managed into collapse once they crossed a hidden threshold of development. The coalition wasn't a government. It was a containment wall. Her apartment locked down without warning. The lights cut. The air cycled into a sterile silence she recognized as a security override. Someone was coming. Kaelin grabbed a data chip containing everything she had found, slipped it into a crevice on her inner forearm plate, and crawled through a maintenance duct seconds before her door was breached. She didn't look back. She simply ran, a historian with no weapon except the truth, which was now the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. She had no allies, no clearance, no plan. Only one name and a question she could not let go. If Marcus Kane was the Sentinel, who or what was he waiting for? And why did the second name feel like a countdown, not a memory? She emerged from the maintenance ducts in the sub-level transport hub, her scales caked with dust and her heart hammering against her ribs. The data chip burned against her forearm like a splinter of truth she could no longer ignore. Kalen boarded a cargo freighter bound for the Outer Rim, paying the captain in untraceable credit chits she had saved for a retirement that now seemed laughably irrelevant. The freighter's manifest listed it as carrying agricultural equipment. She knew better than to ask. The captain, a grizzled Tarkin with one working eye, didn't ask her questions either. He just looked at her trembling hands, nodded, and closed the hatch. She spent the journey in the cargo hold, crouched behind a crate of hydroponic filters, slicing into the data chip with a portable analyzer. The files were encrypted in a language that wasn't meant to be read by coalition eyes. But she was an archivist, trained in linguistic archaeology, and she picked the lock one dead language at a time. Layer by layer, the documents revealed a pattern. Marcus Kane had been stationed in every civilization that ever reached a technological singularity. The threshold was precise. The development of faster-than-light travel combined with the unification of a species under a single polity. Once both conditions were met, the Sentinel arrived within a century, always as an advisor. And within 2 centuries of his arrival, the civilization invariably fractured, collapsed, or was absorbed into the coalition under terms so generous they never questioned the alternative. The file called it controlled descent, a soft landing for a species that might otherwise have destroyed itself, or worse, something else. But the file was incomplete. The ending was redacted, replaced with a single line. All prior cycles have terminated successfully. Final cycle pending, cycle 38, designation Terra. Kalen's blood ran cold. Cycle 38 was Earth, and it wasn't being pruned, it was being kept. The coalition had not collapsed humanity. They had invited humanity in, given them a seat at the table, allowed them to spread. That wasn't containment, that was preparation. She cross-referenced the list of known sentinels. There was only one, Marcus Kane. But the file implied he was the last of many, a replacement for something that had come before. She searched for references to Althea and found a fragment of a conversation recovered from an extinct probe, timestamped 41,000 years ago. The speaker identified itself as Sentinel Prime, and it was speaking to an unknown entity. The transcript was garbled, but one line was clear. The garden is overgrown. I am the blade, but the blade grows dull. You must plant a new seed in the soil of the last harvest. The last harvest was Earth. The new seed was Marcus Kane, and the blade that was growing dull was the original Sentinel Prime, the entity that had been pruning the galaxy since before the stars had names. The entity that was still out there, waiting. And according to the file, its dormancy cycle was ending in 3 days. The freighter dropped out of warp near a derelict station orbiting a dead star. Kalen's contact, the one person she still trusted, was supposed to meet her there. A retired Coalition intelligence officer named Vera, a Xylid who had once saved her life during a data breach on the Ixian border. Vera's message had been brief. I know about the eternal recurrence. I know what Cain really is. Come alone. But when Kalen docked and stepped into the station's leaking airlock, Vera was already dead. Her body was slumped against a console, her four arms frozen in a gesture of surprise. On the monitor above her, a single line of text glowed. "You were warned, Archivist." Kalen spun, expecting the author of the message. The station was silent, but she saw a shadow move at the end of the corridor, a human silhouette in a long coat, brown hair catching the dim emergency light. He didn't approach. He just watched. Then, as if satisfied, he turned and walked into the darkness. She ran after him, screaming his name, Marcus Kane, but the corridor was empty. She returned to Vera's body, grief and terror choking her. Vera's hand was clutching a data rod, a last message recorded on it. Kalen plugged it into her analyzer with shaking claws. Vera's voice, calm and detached, filled the small room. "Kalen, if you're hearing this, I'm already dead. Cain is not a tool, he's a trap. The Althea didn't leave him to prune civilizations. They left him to breed one. Every species that reaches the singularity is a candidate for the final harvest. The Coalition is a sorting mechanism. It evaluates, categorizes, and sends the strongest to Cain. He doesn't kill civilizations, he selects them. The ones that survive his advisory become vessels for the resurrection of the Althea. They don't want to destroy us, they want to become us. And they've already chosen their new host. It's humanity. The Eternal Recurrence program isn't about history. It's about reincarnation. The Althea are coming back and they're wearing human faces. The countdown isn't to a pruning, it's to a birth. Kalen stared at the screen, her mind refusing to accept the words. Humanity wasn't a victim, it was a chrysalis. And Marcus Kane wasn't the sentinel, he was the midwife. Kalen didn't run. The corridor behind her was empty, the shadow gone, but the words from Vera's final message were still carving themselves into her mind. Humanity is a chrysalis. The Althea are coming back and they're wearing human faces. And in 3 days the dormancy cycle would end. She had no army, no political power, no way to warn anyone. But she knew one thing that the Althea hadn't anticipated. A historian trained to see patterns across 40,000 years could spot the one thread they hadn't erased. A flaw in the design. Marcus Kane was the midwife, but every midwife needs a mother. And the mother in this metaphor was the Coalition itself. The sorting mechanism, the containment wall. If she could disrupt the sorting, she could stall the birth. She pulled up the data rod on her analyzer and searched for the exact wording of the Contact Protocol 0. The text was ancient, predating the Coalition by eons, but the final line was chillingly specific. When the 38th cycle achieves harmonic resonance, the seed shall awaken. The resonance is triggered by the unification of the host consciousness under a single governance structure with full integration into the Althean frequency lattice. The Coalition. The Coalition was the single governance structure. And the frequency lattice. That was the Coalition's communication network, the interstellar relays that linked every species, every mind, in a constant stream of data. She checked the date of the Coalition's network upgrade, a routine efficiency optimization scheduled to go live in 3 days. It was described as a simple software patch that would improve latency across all relay nodes. But the timing was too precise to be coincidence. The patch wasn't a patch. It was a trigger. Once the network went live with the new code, every human connected to the grid would be exposed to a signal designed to activate the dormant Althean seed. The birth wouldn't be a gradual emergence. It would be simultaneous, instantaneous, and irreversible. Kalen had exactly 72 hours to stop it. She drafted a message to every Coalition delegate she could remember, a desperate warning about the eternal recurrence program and the true nature of the relay upgrade. She uploaded Vera's recording, the decrypted files, everything. Then, before she could press send, her analyzer went dark. Not a crash, an override. The screen blinked once, then filled with a face she recognized. Director Chen, the human woman from the windowless room, but her expression had changed. No more polite smiles. Her eyes were hollow, her voice calm. Archivist Voss, we have been monitoring your progress. You have done something remarkable. You reached the edge of the truth faster than any of the 37 cycles before you. No other species ever understood until it was too late. The Logra didn't know. The Itrians didn't know. But you, an insectoid from a small archive on the Coalition fringe, you saw the pattern. That makes you useful. The Althea do not want to destroy, they want to become. And they are willing to share the vessel. Your species can join the rebirth. You can be among the first to transcend. Or you can resist and be pruned like the others. The choice is yours, but Marie Kalin, the signal will go live regardless. This is not a negotiation, it is an invitation. Kalin stared at the screen. An invitation. Join the rebirth, or be pruned. The answer came to her not as a thought but as a memory. Her grandmother, dying of a shell-rot disease that could have been cured if the family had been rich enough to afford treatment. She had held her grandmother's claw and promised to become someone who would never let the truth be buried. She would not trade that promise for a seat at the table of a parasite. She terminated the transmission without a word. She knew now what the Althean weakness was. They operated in cycles, always the same pattern because they were not creative. They were a remnant, a shadow, repeating a strategy that had worked 37 times. They had no imagination. They never considered that someone might see the pattern and refuse both options. She couldn't stop the signal, but she could change what it meant. If the signal required a unified human consciousness to activate the seed, then the countermeasure was disunity, fragmentation. If she could introduce chaos into the moment of resonance, the seed might shatter instead of bloom. She needed to get to Earth, to the relay hub that would broadcast the patch, and inject a corruption into the code that would turn the unification frequency into static. And she needed a human to do it, a human who believed her. There was only one human she knew had glimpsed the truth and been silenced, the Jith archivist's contact in the Terran delegation, or perhaps she would find another. The Terran military attaché who had been friendly to the historian community. She remembered a name from the diplomatic rolls, Smith, John Smith, the human who had first presented Earth's history to the Coalition. He had seemed genuine out of his depth, but someone who might listen. She sent a coded message through the old Jith communication channels, hoping it would reach him before the clock ran out. The freighter diverted course toward Earth. The countdown hit 48 hours. Kalin spent the time preparing a virus, a data bomb designed to exploit the resonant frequency of the Althean signal and amplify dissonance. It was a theory, never tested, but she had nothing else. She found an unlikely ally in a young Terran communications officer who intercepted her message, Lieutenant Emma Reyes. She believed Kalin. She had seen her own great-grandfather's service record wiped clean after he had reported seeing the same face in 3 different historical archives. Reyes had been searching for answers. She gave Kalin access to the Earth Relay Nexus, a heavily guarded facility in low orbit. The moment the upgrade began, they would detonate the data bomb. The final hour arrived. The patch began to disseminate across the network. Kalin and Reyes watched the signal spikes on the monitor. The seed frequency was building, a harmonic wave that would wash over every human brain simultaneously. Then Kalin activated the corruption. The wave fractured into 1,000 discordant shards, each one a mirror of the original but inverted, feeding back into itself like a snake eating its tail. The Althean echo screamed across the network, a sound that never reached any ear but sent the system into cascading errors. And then silence. The patch failed. The signal collapsed. The relay nexus went dark. The birth had been stillborn. Kaylin slumped against a console, her carapace slick with stress sweat. Reyes stared at the dead screens, breathing hard. They had done it, for now. But somewhere in the dark between stars, a shadow stirred. Marcus Kane, standing in a chamber older than memory, watched the failure of his life's work with a calm that bordered on relief. He had been a prisoner, too. And for the first time in 40,000 years, his chains were broken. He did not cheer. He simply turned, walked into the ship that had waited for him since the dawn of the last cycle, and set a course for the deepest void where the Althea had first been buried. There was still one loose end to tie, but the historian who had found his name across all those empires, she would live, and the galaxy would live a little longer without becoming a tomb for ancient gods. That was enough. That was enough. For now. Kaylin Voss returned to her archive station, the data chip still embedded in her forearm plate, a splinter of truth she would never remove. The Coalition buried the incident. All records of the relay malfunction were attributed to a routine glitch. The Eternal Recurrence program vanished from every database, scrubbed by hands that no one would ever identify. Director Chen's office issued a formal commendation for Lieutenant Rey's quick response to a technical anomaly, promoting her somewhere far from Earth. And the name Marcus Kane ceased to exist in any official ledger. Kaylin never spoke of him again, not publicly. But late at night, alone in her data crypt, she sometimes pulled up the one file she had managed to preserve. A mural fragment from a dead empire, showing a quiet human face beside a throne, unchanged across 40 millennia. She kept it not as proof, but as a question. How many other cycles had ended before she was born? How many seeds still slept in the soil of the galaxy? And who was watching now in the silence between stars, waiting for the next civilization to reach too high? The archives hold every empire that ever rose and fell. But what they don't hold, what they can never hold, are the things that never allow themselves to be recorded. If you want to explore more hidden corners of history, real or imagined, subscribe now and join us for the next story.